We were always wondering about that. What if they were that kind of people and actually did kill a guy and then butchered him up and had us over for dinner? I believe we ate him.
Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. My name's Anne, but I also go by my nickname Mimi. I like to focus on Midwest true crime because I'm a Minnesota farmer's daughter. Today we're going to go to the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, which is a gorgeous area. It's really hard to juxtapose such a pretty area with the gruesome crime that we're going to talk about today. This case was suggested by Karen Pearson, so thank you very much for the suggestion. Chris Regan was born and raised in Detroit, Michigan. He got married shortly after high school and had 2 sons. Chris served many years in the Air Force before retiring. In 2010, he and his wife divorced and he remarried just 3 months later, but that marriage was short-lived and also ended in divorce. It was around this time Chris reconnected with an old friend thanks to the internet. When Chris was in the Air Force in the 1980s and stationed near Marquette, Michigan, he had met a teacher named Terry O'Donnell at a bar. I don't know if they were just friends or more at that time, but regardless, they didn't stay in touch. Years later, after they were both divorced, they found each other on Facebook and began chatting. Chris decided to move to Iron River, Michigan to be closer to Terry so they could pursue a relationship. He got a job with Lakeshore Systems, which was a factory that made maritime and mining parts. Iron River is a small town of about 3,000 in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, which, like I said, is gorgeous. To me, it's one of the most beautiful areas in the United States. Chris loved living in the UP. It fit his lifestyle because he loved to be in the outdoors, and this area was full of woodland, waterfalls, and lakes. Chris and Terry cared deeply for one another, but their relationship had struggles. Chris liked to have casual sex with other women. He kept telling Terry the other women didn't mean anything, it was just sex, but I don't blame Terry for not being comfortable with that. They ended their relationship in April 2014, but stayed very good friends and talked almost every day. In the summer of 2014, Chris had knee surgery and had to wear a knee brace every day. His job at Lakeshore Systems was hard on his knee because he had to be on his feet all day, so he started to look for other jobs. In the fall of 2014, he accepted a desk job in Asheville, North Carolina. It was a really great opportunity. Chris had had a strained relationship with his son since the divorce, but they had been working on reconnecting again. One of his sons decided to move with Chris, so they made plans to move to Asheville at the end of October or beginning of November. Chris and Terry were also trying to patch things up, and from my understanding, she was also going to move to Asheville at a later date. On the morning of October 14th, 2014, Chris and Terry texted back and forth about some upcoming plans, and then Chris kind of just disappeared. He had an appointment the next day for pre-employment drug screening for the new job, but he didn't show up for that. He didn't show up for his shift at the factory. Terry became worried when he wasn't responding to texts or phone calls. Chris's sons were worried too because they had been in regular communication too, and they hadn't heard from their father either. Terry started to call friends and coworkers to see if anybody had seen any sign of Chris. Most told her she was probably overreacting, and Chris had either went ahead and moved to North Carolina, or they even told her that he might have found another woman and was just leaving her behind and she should basically just get over it. But Terry knew Chris, and she knew he wouldn't just leave and not tell her. She knew something was wrong. About 10 days after Chris was last heard from, someone told Terry they saw Chris's car parked in a park and ride parking lot about 4 miles east of town. Terry drove there and found Chris's car parked there. When she peeked in the window, she could see his knee brace on the seat. Chris loved his car, and Terry knew he would never abandon it in some parking lot, so she called police and reported him missing. Iron River is in kind of a remote location, and the police department was not huge. They had about 6 officers at the time. Chief of police was Laura Frizzo. Terry went with police to Chris's apartment, and it was very disheveled, and Terry said that was unlike Chris. He usually kept his apartment pretty tidy. Other than that, nothing stood out in his apartment. They did notice that his phone was missing. When they searched his car, they found a note that had directions to a home in nearby Caspian, which was a former mining town close to Iron River. Police found out this house belonged to Jason and Kelly Cochran. Police went to that house and Jason answered the door. When they asked if Kelly was home too, he said no, and she hasn't done anything wrong. But Kelly was home, and she came out behind Jason and talked to police. She said she knew Chris because they worked together at Lakeshore Systems, and she also said they had been having an intimate relationship, but her husband knew all about it because they were in an open marriage. She said she had invited Chris to her house on the night of October 14th to eat lasagna, and that's why he had written down directions to her house. But she said she had changed her mind and she decided to bring the lasagna to his apartment that night, and she said she hadn't heard from him since, but she assumed he had already moved to North Carolina. They told Kelly they had found Chris's car abandoned in a parking lot, and they asked her if that was something he would do, and Kelly said no, he loved that car. This caught their attention because Kelly had used past tense, loved. When police talked to Chris and Kelly's coworkers, they said Kelly often complained about her marriage with Jason and how he had a temper. Jason did have some deep mental demons that he struggled with. He battled anxiety and depression. He also had spent time in a mental health facility. Coworkers told police they knew of the not-so-secret affair between Chris and Kelly. The HR director even knew about it. So police decided to look into Jason and Kelly Cochran a little more. Kelly Gaboyan was born on June 15, 1982 in Indiana. She was a troubled child, often ran away from home, and was sent to a juvenile detention center once. She started using drugs, including heroin, while in high school. Kelly's mom kicked her out at one point, but then let her move back in. Jason Cochran lived next door to Kelly, and the two were high school sweethearts. They got married in 2002 when Kelly was 20 and Jason was 24. People described them as an odd couple and that they didn't really fit each other. Kelly was loud and outgoing. Jason was quiet and reserved. Kelly's own brother didn't think the two should have ever even been married because they were just such opposites. Kelly went to college and studied psychology, sociology, and forensics, but she and Jason started a swimming pool service business. Things went well for 10 years until Jason developed back problems due to years of physical labor and could no longer do his job. Life wasn't easy for them in Indiana. Jason couldn't work due to his back, and Kelly didn't bring in a lot of money on her own, so they struggled financially. In 2013, they decided to move out of Indiana to get a fresh start. They chose to move to Iron River, Michigan, but they weren't drawn to the area for its breathtaking natural beauty. Jason wanted weed. It helped his back pain and he couldn't get a medical marijuana card in Indiana, but he could in Michigan. Kelly got a job at Lakeshore Systems and soon met Chris there. They started out as friends, but it quickly grew to more. Chris was 53 and Kelly was 32, but they got along well. Coworkers noticed how close Chris and Kelly were getting and how they often spent their work breaks together. They didn't have to keep it too much of a secret though, since Jason and Kelly were in an open relationship. Chris was not the first person Kelly had seen outside her marriage, and he wasn't even the only one at that time. Kelly was also seeing another coworker at the same time. It doesn't sound like Jason had too many women on the side, and he wasn't really happy about them being in an open relationship. Friends felt Jason only went along with this to keep Kelly happy. Apparently, along with his back problems, Jason also struggled to perform in bed, so he decided to let Kelly do what she wanted to do to avoid divorce. Jason would often text Kelly when she was with other men and beg her to come home. After learning about Chris's affair with Kelly, police brought in Jason and Kelly for questioning. Kelly seemed calm and composed during her interrogation. Jason was sweating like a pig.
Did you have an intimate relationship?
Yes, we did.
Okay. And obviously your husband knows or doesn't know about that?
He knows.
He knows.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And your husband didn't mind that this was going on, or what?
I was open with him. Chris wasn't the only one I was seeing.
Wasn't really happy, but I know my wife's kind of been seeing people the last couple of months. Well, it was my choice on whether to divorce or try to stick it out for a little while. I either had to accept it or to let her go.
Kelly said she loved Chris and she talked about how passionate they were.
I love Chris. And a lot of times we didn't actually make it to the bedroom.
You could have been in the living room.
Yeah.
Kelly had told police she had gone to Chris's apartment the night he disappeared, but her phone GPS didn't place her there. And when they looked into the GPS on Chris's car, it actually showed he had went to Jason and Kelly's house that night. Police even found surveillance of Chris stopping at a gas station near their home on the night he disappeared. When police talked to Jason and Kelly's neighbors, some of them reported hearing a gunshot on the night of October 14th, and then in the middle of the night, the sound of power tools running. Jason told them he was working on building some stairs, but police couldn't find any sign that he'd actually built any stairs or repaired any stairs. Neighbors also told police that a couple days after they heard the power tools, Jason and Kelly invited a lot of the neighbors over for a big barbecue, which was odd because they'd never really done this before, and also people knew Jason and Kelly struggled financially, so it didn't make a lot of sense that they were throwing a big barbecue for the neighborhood. They served meat that was described as not hamburger, Jason told the people that he used to work as a butcher and he liked to work with exotic meat. Around this time, Jason and Kelly burned something in their burn barrel, and neighbors said it had a horrible smell to it. In March of 2015, police searched Jason and Kelly's home. They saw one area on the ceiling that looked like it had blood splatter but had been painted over. They tried to test the blood for DNA, but the paint had ruined it. The only other thing they found of relevance was a book that Jason was writing that talked about him wanting to be a murderous psychopath and kill people out of revenge. Police looked into Kelly's Google search history and found she had looked up the Caspian Pit, which was an abandoned mine pit nearby. Divers searched the water in the pit and didn't find a body, but they did find a burn barrel. In it was a burned saw blade and metal buttons and a zipper from a pair of Old Navy jeans. Unfortunately, no DNA could be extracted from those items or the burn barrel. Kelly and Jason's burn barrel was not on their property, so police believe this burn barrel was theirs. The very next day after the search, Jason and Kelly fled to Indiana. They just up and left. They barely packed anything with them. Jason even apparently left behind his marijuana plants. Police did another search of this home after they had left, and this time they found a rabbit's foot underneath the house. They talked to Terry and they asked her if this was something that Chris owned, and she said yes, he did own a rabbit's foot for luck. All of this still wasn't enough to indicate Jason and Kelly killed Chris, and in fact most of the Iron River Police Department didn't even think Jason and Kelly had anything to do with it. They really thought Chris either had moved and started life over or he ended his own life. But Chief of Police Laura Frizzo was very suspicious of Kelly and Jason, so she kept an eye on him. Flash forward to about a year later, on February 20th, 2016 in Indiana, Kelly called 911.
Wake County 911. His face is like blue. He's breathing barely. I don't know what's wrong. He's throwing up. He's sweating. I need an ambulance right away.
And how old is the person?
37. Just get an ambulance here right now.
Okay, stay on the line with me.
I need an ambulance here right away.
Okay, they've been dispatched.
When EMS arrived, Kelly was hysterical and Jason was dead. EMS tried to revive him, but it was too late. It was looking like Jason had OD'd on heroin, but this surprised his friends. They knew he smoked weed, but they didn't think he did hard drugs. When Jason's autopsy was performed, they did find a large amount of heroin in his system, along with some prescription drugs. But his autopsy also showed signs of strangulation, so the manner of death was ruled homicide. Indiana Detective Jeremy Ogden was assigned the case. Like I said, Detective Frizzo had kept an eye on Jason and Kelly, so she had heard about his death. She reached out to Detective Ogden. She told him how she was suspicious of Kelly and Jason for the disappearance of a man in Michigan. And now Indiana police were suspicious of her in the death of her husband. So Detective Frizzo and Detective Ogden started to work together. Detective Ogden brought Kelly in for questioning over her husband's death, and she developed kind of a crush on him almost immediately. She was kind of flirty in her responses. I think Detective Ogden picked up on that and played into it, but this helped their investigation because Kelly seemed to trust Detective Ogden. Kelly said she had woken up that morning and noticed Jason wasn't snoring like he usually did, and then he started vomiting and turning blue, and so that was when she called 911. Detective Ogden was obviously suspicious of her, but didn't have anything to arrest her, so he let her go. Kelly often played cat and mouse games with police. She would tell them things that were not true and just mess with them. In April of 2016, Kelly texted Detective Ogden and asked if he'd ever been on the West Coast and said, quote, "I was driving last night," unquote. So now they were thinking, is she possibly on the lam in the West Coast? Kelly agreed to come in and talk to Detective Ogden again, but she never showed up for that appointment, so a warrant was issued for her arrest. Police used the GPS data on her phone to track her to her cousin's home in Kentucky, and Kelly was arrested on April 28, 2016. When Kelly was questioned, she told police she would only cooperate as long as she wasn't charged with anything.
Today I'm here to cooperate. However, I will not cooperate if there's any charges brought to me. I've seen how easy it is for you to get a search warrant. I see how it is for you pretty much to go through anything with people's stuff. I think you can arrange something like that for me.
Police were like, no, and they let her go when she wouldn't cooperate. Detective Ogden then came up with a kind of sneaky plan. He asked one of Jason's friends if he could call Kelly and pretend to say that he had received a letter in the mail from Jason that had another sealed envelope in it with instructions to bring that envelope to the Iron River Police in case something happened to him. This friend was nervous about it, but he did agree to help police, and so they worked to make up a script of what the fake letter would say. Detective Ogden had signed it at Jason, but the friend said, oh, we have to change that to quack quack because that's how Jason always referred to himself to this friend, and Kelly would know that. This friend called Kelly up while police were recording the conversation.
The note says, if something were to happen to me, please send this in a few weeks. Do not open it. There's an envelope in there with no return address to the Iron River Police Department. It's like I'm supposed to mail this, but I just wanted to tell you.
Please don't.
This must have put a little fear in Kelly because 2 days later, she called up Detective Ogden and said she was ready to come in and talk. When she went in, she confessed that they were responsible for Chris's death, but she said it was all Jason's doing. She said he was violent and controlling. She also said they'd made a pact on their wedding night that if either of them cheated on each other, they would kill the lover. Kelly said Jason forced her to lure Chris to their house with the promise of lasagna and sex. After Kelly and Chris had sex, they were standing at the top of the stairs, still kind of hugging each other, and Jason came up behind Chris and shot him in the back of the head. Chris died instantly. They then took his body down to the basement, laid Chris's body on plastic, and cut him into pieces with an electric saw.
What happened? How? What did he do with Chris?
Cut him up.
They burned the plastic and saw blade in their burn barrel and then tossed the barrel in the mine pit. Jason drove Chris's car to the parking lot where it was found. Kelly picked him up, and they then drove around the woods and scattered Chris's body parts. Kelly was arrested and put in jail, but police did take her out one day on a kind of field trip. They first took her back to the house so she could tell them in more detail how and where the murder occurred. Not much had changed in the house because Kelly and Jason had fled to Indiana so quickly. While in the kitchen, Kelly pointed to some forceps. She said she had used those forceps to try to fish the bullet out of Chris's skull, but had been unsuccessful. These forceps still had blood on them, and when it was tested, it was found that it was Chris's blood. Kelly led police to the woods where they had disposed of Chris's body parts. She kind of toyed with them and first said they had put bags of his body parts in the lake.
In a Ziploc bag, it's sealed, it's right out here. All right.
No one's gonna get in. I really can't get in?
No, you can't get in.
Why?
You're telling me it's 10 feet out right here?
Yeah.
In a Ziploc bag.
And it's weighted.
With
so
what? How's it weighted?
It's got a stone on the bottom. It's weighted.
Why yesterday did you tell me that this was buried next to some bench or some shit?
Because you passed benches to get to it. And I figured you guys might take your own trip out here.
There's something that's buried, right?
And then she can use her metal detector.
Okay. So where do we go?
Road trip.
She then told them the parts were buried in a different location, so they went over there.
In that opening?
Through that trail.
How far? How far?
40, 50 foot. He's got to go up further.
How far?
Probably 30 foot from where he's at.
What would the biggest piece of bone be that you... I mean...
Torso.
Torso, and that was here?
Yeah.
So then we should find ribs, and I think that generally...
The skull should be the biggest, though.
Kelly seemed to be having a jolly old time while they were out and about. She got cigarettes, M&Ms, pizza, pop.
Are you all right?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll grab like a bag of M&Ms in case she wants to eat them while we're out, and also I have actually the cigarettes that I bought for her.
Cheese pizza? Just cheese? There you go. Do you mind if I open her door and take her out to smoke on the side?
You can shoot me for a round.
Can smoke together.
Did you grab cigarettes?
At one point, Detective Ogden mentions how it is a beautiful area, and Kelly says it's a good area to get rid of people.
Yep, beautiful.
Easy to get rid of people.
Yeah. And?
Same. Perfect place.
Did you use it to get rid of people? This place?
Is it that?
Yeah. Of who?
Jason.
Yeah.
He's one of them.
They brought cadaver dogs to the area, and cadaver dogs led them to a bag that had a skull in it with a hole. Dental records confirmed it was Chris's skull. The rest of his body has never been found. Kelly's trial for Chris's murder started in early 2017 in Michigan. Her defense tried to claim it was all Jason's fault and he had forced Kelly to help dismember and dispose of Chris's body. They tried to paint a picture of Jason being controlling and mean and ordering Kelly around, but when police looked into their text conversations, none of that was seen. Jason wouldn't even yell at Kelly when she was with other men. He would just beg her to come home to him. The jury didn't buy that defense, and they found Kelly guilty of first-degree murder and other counts related to Chris's murder. She was sentenced to life in prison. After everything came out about Chris's murder, the neighbors who had been invited over to that barbecue at Jason and Kelly's wondered if that strange meat they ate had been Chris.
Kelly and Jason asked if I wanted to come over for dinner one night. I was like, yeah, sure. And this was like 2 days after Chris was missing. Well, it was definitely something I never ate before. It was like a transparent kind of like meat, like a lobster or shrimp. We were always wondering about that. What if they were that kind of people and actually did kill a guy and then butchered him up and had us over for dinner? I believe we ate him.
One of the neighbors said to another neighbor, "Dude, we ate dude." You do have to wonder if Jason and Kelly did cook up Chris's body parts and fed him in that barbecue and got some sort of sick enjoyment out of feeding human body parts to other people without their knowledge. In April of 2018, rather than go through another trial, Kelly pled guilty to murdering her husband. She said Chris was the only good thing she had had in her life, and she blamed Jason for his murder. So she decided to murder Jason as revenge. She gave him a large dose of heroin, but it was taking too long for him to die, so she put her hands over his mouth and around his neck and strangled him. 65 years were added to Kelly's prison time. After Kelly had finally admitted to the truth about what happened to Jason and Chris, she began to indicate that there might be even more murders that she's responsible for. She told police she had killed 21 people over the years. Police had already wondered if this wasn't the first murder that Jason and Kelly had been responsible for, since they had cleaned up so well after Chris's murder. Chris was not Kelly's first affair, so if they really did have this pact to kill each other's lovers, it's likely that they did murder other lovers. Even if that pact was a lie, maybe they just enjoyed killing people for the fun of it. Kelly has described herself as a psychopath, and she said that she feels she was born this way. While she had been out on that field trip to find Chris's body parts, at one point she and Detective Ogden were sitting down. They did have kind of an interesting conversation.
Did you really kill 21 people?
Why don't you see that?
You're hesitant on things with me that there's no reason for you to be hesitant with me at this point. You understand that if it's not true, I don't want to know.
What do you mean?
I only want the truth.
Right.
That's all I've ever wanted.
Right. And I played a lot of games because I was hesitant. And the other important thing was with my family. Some of the details are going to come out on what happened. Can you imagine what even just my mom and dad are going to feel about that? Like I put with them, there's good and bad, but it kind of goes beyond bad, doesn't it?
Well, I mean...
It goes into evil, and I've...
So, do you think you're evil?
Yeah.
Do you meet people with the sole intention of killing them?
I try not to.
But is that what happens, or how quickly do you know?
Right away.
Yeah?
There were people that come across my life, like the one I didn't really want to give the last name, because I wanted to make it as horrible for him as possible. And I didn't lose sleep over what happened. I really, even at that age, I didn't lose sleep over that.
You never worried about getting caught along the way? Why?
Because I'm so sure of myself.
Yeah? Just like now.
I'm caught. I caught myself.
If Kelly truly is a serial killer, we will probably never know. Police have never been able to tie any other murders back to her. Detective Laura Frizzo, who was pretty much the only Iron River detective to think Chris was murdered, was fired in December 2016 due to irreconcilable differences. The city manager apparently has a long history of not liking women in the department, and Detective Frizzo wonders if that misogyny, along with the fact that she had stayed on Kelly's trail, even though everybody else thought Chris left on his own, caused her to be fired. She appealed her termination but was unsuccessful. There is some good news with her, though. She and Detective Jeremy Ogden, who met while working on this case, started dating, fell in love, and are still together to this day. I wonder what Kelly thinks about that, since she had a crush on Detective Ogden. Terry was obviously heartbroken over Chris's death. It's so obvious she cared so much about him. She was so devoted to try to find him when he was missing. She said she would never know if they would have been able to have a relationship again.
He's gone. We never had that opportunity to see if we could rebuild things or not. Kelly took that away.
That's all I have for this case. I'd love to hear your thoughts below. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye.